all the new houses that have been built. I think that it's important for us to do something similar to what the county has done, which is actually lower the rate per dollar of valuation, which still gives you a significant increase in budget to be able to do the things that the city has proposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gary, and then Jet Burns, you're on deck.
My name is Gary Nephendorf. I'm city resident and a candidate for county judge. The proposed rate in the budget equates to a 12.7% property tax increase. I submit to you, you don't need to go that high. There are many reasons, but I will submit 2 reasons if time permits. First, your general fund budget shows a $1.5 million deficit, but you have over $1.8 million one-time or once every 10-year expenditures. For example, net American Rescue expenses, $770,000. Land purchase, $350,000. Pool plastering, $344,000. Comprehensive plan update, $200,000 or more. So if you take all those extraordinary items of $1.8 million, you can take $300,000 of the $540,000 property tax increase away and still have a balanced budget. By the way, the balanced budget includes 4% salary increase, retirement, health and insurance increases, $400,000 in increased EMS funding for a new ambulance, and 6 new employees, 7 new police officers, and on and on. Secondly, on page 18, the estimated general fund 3-month reserve, that $6.7 million was calculated by using all of the American Rescue Fund expenditures. More realistic number to use is $4.8 million, which doesn't include all those extra expenditures. You don't need extra reserves just because you're making extra expenditures in 1 year. If you used $4.8 million as the calculated reserve requirement, you would have $1.8 million extra and still in reserves above the 4.8 or whatever the calculated rate is. So you don't need a tax increase. You can still do everything you want to do. Just don't pile on extra property taxes just because you can. You can get there with flat or a little increase. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Jet Burns, and then Mo, you're up on deck.
Hello, Council. My name is Jet Burns. I live outside the city. I just wanted to raise wanted to voice my support of the no new revenue tax rate, or better yet, a tax rate lower than that, since COVID and its related restrictions have and continue to cause issues for businesses in this town and the surrounding area. Annette makes a great point about affordable housing. If we want people to live here, especially our workers and young people like me, who serve us food, fix our cars, go to school here, etc., we need to make it as easy as possible for them to live here. Like I said, that group of people includes me, being 21 years old today. It'd be a nice birthday present if we have a lower tax rate passed today. Thank you.
Happy birthday to you. Thank you. Mo, and then Brian Bierschwald, you're on deck. Not at all. Thanks, Mo.
Thank you. My name is Mo Saidi. I live in the city, and I'm also the Gillespie County Republican Chair. A couple of things I want to talk about here. Let me say, this whole topic of a tax is a very complex tax, and it really doesn't justify 3 minutes discussion on it, but I'll try to be clear. First of all, when we are talking about no new revenue, we're talking about voter approves, we're talking about de minimis rates and all of that. you have to understand that these are ceilings that the controllers has set for us to evaluate the lower and the upper limits of what you can do to play around with it. That doesn't mean that they are suggested to adopt the rates to those levels if you don't need it. So the rates could go higher, they could go lower. And for example, I have been in discussions with the city and with the county and also FISD and appraisal districts, and I've spent horrendous amount of time on this with the controller's office. I'm glad to tell you that these are, my data tells me FISD is dropping their rates by almost like 7.7 cents. The county is going to drop it by almost like 5%, 4.6%. So I think it's time for city to follow the flow of things the way it's going. I noticed in the presentation the value, the voter approved rate of 0.232379 that is projected in those tables. It doesn't tell you that that includes 2 cents carryover from last year, which you do not really need to do that. It's piling it on top of everyone for the purpose of a discussion, but it doesn't apply in my judgment. Why? The controller's office allows you to do that for the communities that are small enough that they do not have enough revenue in order to carry their expenses, so they can rely upon last year's. At any rate, I know my time is coming up, but
Well, let me interrupt for just a second. Whatever time you don't have now, you can come back in the public hearing section. So don't rush yourself.
I appreciate that.
Don't rush yourself. You
Thank
have
you
an
so much.
opportunity to come back.
So that is really, and if you take, and the other thing is, I notice, and maybe it's my lack of understanding of the budget that is provided, there are M&O rates that are different than what the appraisal calculation was. There are debt rates that are different than what the appraisal calculation done. The city is lower. I don't understand all that, but what I understand is if it is lower, your voter approved rates would be lower than 0.23. And I have shown you a calculation that says my estimation tells you how much that would be lower. So the proposed rate of 2.22077, which is today, is in fact a tax increase. So please don't come and tell the community that we kept it the same as last year. You don't have to worry about it. It is in fact increased. You heard it from several others. And if you go to that rate, you still generate 12.7% revenue above and beyond what you already have and shown above the no new revenue rate.
Okay, Mo, do you want to finish this during the public hearing?
Yes.
Or do you have just a?
So let me
Yeah.
just say one concluding remark here. Overall, I'm all for the no new revenue, and any rate above that, it really shows, and I don't want to make this personalized, but it shows a lack of justification to warrant it. It shows a lack of concern for the citizens' complaint, because that was the reasons we put out the resolution. It shows disregard for the windfall that we're getting from the property valuation, and it's out of norm with the county and the school. So I'll talk about that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mo. You can finish up your comments later. Okay, Brian Bierschwal, and then Heath Bell. And Heath, I appreciate you getting your name printed where I could read it correctly. Thank you. Okay, Brian.
Okay. My name is Brian Bierschwal. I'm not a resident of the city, but I do live in the county and own a number of properties in the city, and I feel like I pay quite a bit of city property tax. With the appraisals going up because of fair market value, I understand how that works. I used to be on the appraisal review board. With this market value, it is what it is. It just makes sense. You've got to reduce the rate. The county did it. The school did it. You've got to do it to make common sense, to maintain respect among your citizens. It just needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Heath? And you're the last speaker that signed up during the public
Indeed.
comment. Thank
And
you.
I apologize about signing my name.
No, I appreciate you, whoever
Indeed, I
wrote your
agree.
name there. I couldn't get it.
I decided to print it because I realized, well, you probably are used to this, just signing your name instinctually and everything.
Thank
all
you.
right.
Okay, you can start this time now that we had this short conversation. Thank you.
Well, I'm Heath Bell. I am a local young small business owner, local worker from Fredericksburg. I have lived here my whole life. So I am opposed to a higher tax rate, to any higher tax rate, and I support the no new revenue rate as everyone has so far. And as Mr. Saidi mentioned, this is similar to what the FISD and county governments are doing, is in response to property valuations increasing, what they've done is they've actually lowered the tax rate to have a no new revenue rate, right? So it ultimately comes down to property valuation. My perspective, I guess, is for the future, like 5 years, what are we looking at? Especially given this current trend of property valuations increasing, people selling their homes, in some cases, some really, not that expensive homes for incredible prices, they're replaced by B&Bs, and then the people look at it, they're like, ooh, look, it's a really expensive house. So then what happens? Property valuations go up more, taxes go up more. So in the end, what you end up with is, as Mr. Burns had mentioned, what you end up with is lower income people being forced into increasingly cheaper housing, right? So what that does in the end is, paired with the increasing taxes, the increasing B&B situation, is you have cheaper housing and then businesses closing, as well as a workforce increasingly escaping to Kerrville, right? Like taking, a relatively inexpensive house, selling it for $500,000 and going and buying, a comparatively better house in Kerrville. Many such cases, actually. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for y'all's comments. We're going to move now to section 3, FYI 2022 city budget. There's 4 items under there. I, review and discuss proposed FY 2022 budget. I, hold a public hearing to receive comments on the FY 2022 budget. I, announce a date, time, and location of the adoption of the FY 2022 city budget, Monday, September the 20th, 2021 at 6 p.m. at the Law Enforcement Center, 1601 East Main Street, Fredericksburg, Texas. So with that, we'll move to I, which is review and discuss proposed 2022 budget. Kent?
Mayor and council and members of the public, this evening what I'd like to do is just present a really brief summary of the current budget, where it stands, and everything that I'll be presenting tonight is in the proposed budget. And I want to emphasize the word proposed because nothing's been approved at this point. It's still under discussion, and in fact the budget and tax rate won't be subject to final approval for another month, so plenty of time for the council to make additional changes as we proceed over the next 30 days. So everything I'm going to share with you tonight is kind of where we are at this time with the proposed budget. Okay. So, and again, this will be short, just an overview. I have about 5 slides that I want to present. So first off, I want to throw some numbers out to you and give you an indication on how large our organization is. Our budget for the FY 2022 year is about $70.8 million. That again is our proposed budget. And our budget for the current year, which is basically extends till the end of September, is about $64.6 million. And I've also added the budget from last year. And the reason I did that is keep in mind that our current budget was done under some very unusual circumstances. Last summer, we were putting together a budget right in the middle of the peak of COVID. We had very uncertain revenues for sales tax and HOT and other sources. We made a lot of cutbacks in our budget. So I think for purposes of comparison, it's probably better to compare our proposed budget for 2022 with our actual budget in 20. And you can see those numbers are pretty close. One of the things what we also want to emphasize is, in order to balance the budget, as as we've done in past years, we're going to make use of our fund balances. And this is in most of our major funds, general fund, electric fund, and so forth. We've built up some fund balance in these funds, and we want to use those balances in certain cases. We also this year will be using some different revenue sources in addition to property taxes and sales tax and utility revenues and our standard revenues. We have, as a previous speaker mentioned, we have access to about $2.8 million in federal money this year through the American Rescue Plan Act. We also have about between $2 and $3 million left over from a prior water bond issue that we're recommending we go ahead and appropriate. And then we have built up water and sewer impact fees that we charge for new development. All these are kind of new revenue sources that have been included in the budget in addition to taxes and other fees. And then the last thing I want to point out on this slide is the fact that even though we're using fund balances and we're using all these revenue sources, we still are going to end up next year with all major funds exceeding our fund balances. And the reason that's important, a couple of reasons. One is in case of emergencies, you have to have a certain amount of fund balances. And then I think another reason is COVID is starting to generate some more positive cases in our community, and very important that we build up, so we at least maintain some fund balances just in case our economy starts sliding like it did last year. So we do have adequate fund balances as we continue through the rest of next year. Okay. Next slide. So next slide will just give you an overview of our fees and taxes that are included in our proposed budget at this point in time. And so right now what's in the proposed budget is maintaining our current property tax rate. Here later on this evening, the council will actually take their initial vote on that tax rate, but right now we have the revenues from our current property tax rate, which is 0.220775 per $100 valuation. That'll generate of about $700,000 in additional revenues. And again, this is the preliminary tax rate. The council's had one discussion on that, but no action's been taken. And again, that initial action will be taken later. We also are included in the budget. We've seen some real good growth over the last year in both our sales tax and hot revenues. More visitors are coming here, staying in at our hotels and short-term rentals. It's helped our hot revenues rebound. And then, as you know, we're getting more and more visitors here, spending money and helping to support our economy. So fortunately, Fredericksburg's in a great financial position in terms of our major revenue sources, sales tax and hot revenues. We also wanted to mention we have a 3% increase in our electric rates included in the budget. We have not raised our electric rates since 2015, and over the last couple of years we've done some major projects in our electric department. The most visible ones going on right now on Main Street, where we're replacing all the street lights with the historic looking street light poles, but we've also built a new facility for electric department. We've also added new electric meters. So we've done a lot of new projects in the electric fund, and we have not raised rates. Well, this year, the proposed budget does include a 3% increase in electric rates. I want to also mention that the other major services that you provide, most of those do not have any sort of rate increase. And a lot of cities, they budget annual increases in some of these. We have not had an increase in some of these areas like water and wastewater. We're not recommending any increase. Sanitation, stormwater fees, parks, building fees, none of those are included in the budget for a fee increase. On the other hand, our EMS costs have increased pretty dramatically over the last couple of years, and a lot of that is due to the cost of medical supplies, but also fuel costs have gone up. Our operating costs for EMS have increased, and so this year we're recommending an increase in our EMS fees of $100 per call. And last, a couple other fees. We have in our budget an increase in revenues from our short-term rental permit fees. That is a very preliminary number. The number in the budget is based upon a $300 per STR unit, and the council has not made a decision on that. We anticipate that decision on the STR permit fees will be made in the next 60 days or so, and that revenue will be adjusted accordingly. But for the sake of the budget right now, it includes an increase in STR permit fees from $150 to $300. And again, the council will just likely decide something different here in the next month or two. And then several years ago, we increased our health permit fees in the city and the county. We were not able to increase those health permit fees in the county because of limits of state law. And so this year, we're recommending that the fees charged to county establishments be set at the same level as the in-city food establishments. So that doesn't affect, if you have a restaurant in the city, it doesn't affect you, but if you do have a restaurant in the county, your fees would go up. And that will bring them to a consistent level in the city and in the county. So those are the major highlights of the budget, proposed budget in terms of fees and taxes. Next. Largest area of the budget, we're, again, a service organization. We have about 180 full-time employees. A lot of these employees work 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and we have a full-service city where we provide all basic services, and so it takes people to operate those services. And as a result of increases in some of the workload in certain departments, we are recommending that we add positions in different departments this year. The biggest add-on is 6 paramedics and EMTs. This will allow us to staff, if this is approved in the final budget, it will allow us to staff the 3rd EMS unit. And the reason that is so important is a lot of times our 2 units are tied up either in the city or out making a transfer to the hospital in San Antonio or Austin, and we have to call in a 3rd unit, on a regular basis, and that creates a lot of delay in response time. So we put off the addition of the 3rd unit for several years, and so this year, because of increase in our calls, we're recommending to add a 3rd EMS unit, which will require 6 paramedic EMTs in order to staff that around the clock. We also, a joint project with the school district is adding a 3rd school resource officer. This will be largely based at the elementary school, but it will also cover some of the other schools. The school district will pay half of that salary and benefits. We're adding what's called an evidence technician in the police department to help with some of their processing of crime scenes and some of their increased workload as far as the investigative division. I think some of you know we've added a new code enforcement officer to keep up with code complaints. So now we have 2 code enforcement officers. We added a meter tech position in the water and electric department. That's a shared responsibility. And we're adding a sanitation worker. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. And we're adding a stormwater employee. I'll tell you a little bit about that again on the next slide. In terms of salary increases, I think Gary mentioned we are in the budget right now. We have a salary increase, what's called a COLA, or cost of living adjustment, of 2%. And then for the employees that qualify, they will have access to a 2% merit increase. So a total of 4%. The COLA is due to inflationary costs that our employees are facing, like many of you, and in order to keep up with the increased costs, city and government oftentimes provides cost of living adjustments. We've also, over the last several months, we've completed a salary survey comparing our positions with the salaries in other cities. We lose a lot of employees to Bernie, some employees to Kerrville. It's very important that we stay competitive so we don't serve as a training ground for other cities. And so we did a salary survey, and it's recommending we adjust some of our salaries. We have not finished review of that study, and the council hadn't acted on that, but the council's agreed at this point to set aside $250,000 in the budget to when we come back to the salary adjustments here in a couple of months, they'll have money to allocate if they choose to approve some additional salary adjustments. That's intended to keep our employees at market rates so that we're competitive with other cities. And then I think Gary also mentioned we all are increasing our contribution to health insurance. We're self-funded, and our health costs have gone up, our medical costs have gone up, our claims have gone up. We've postponed an increase for several years, and so the budget increases our contributions to health insurance by 10%. Okay, a couple of final slides before we open this up. One of the things we do when we start the budget process every year, we ask the council for what their major priorities are for the coming year. The council is elected by the people to establish the service levels of the different city departments, and so they basically set the marching orders for the city that they want to accomplish during the next year. One of the major priorities of the city council when they sat down last May is they want to continue to make sure our city is very beautiful, very attractive for both our residents and our visitors. And so the new code enforcement officer will help with that goal. We're also planning to expand our street sweeping program into residential areas. So those of you that call City Hall and we can't sweep your streets on a regular basis, well, this budget includes a new street sweeper and a new employee to cover residential areas with a regular street sweeping program. We also are recommending we expand the wastewater, the trash cans in the downtown area. We want to, those are, with the influx we've had of additional visitors are overflowing. We need more trash cans. We need to pick them up on a regular basis. So we're expanding that program. All these fit into the council's priority of keeping the community attractive. And we are already known as being a very attractive community. We want to make sure we maintain that stature. And I think it's, again, a priority of the council. Another priority of the council is to look at our building needs over the next several years. We're running out of space. If you go through the offices behind me here, you'll see people doubled up, 3 or 4 people in offices. And so we need to look at expansion of some of our city facilities. So we do have money in our budget next year to bring some architects on board to start planning and coming up with cost estimates on what it would cost to build a new police station, possibly expand our city offices. And then the visitor center is out of space. And so we have money budgeted in the tourism fund to hire an architect to look at expansion of the visitor center. I already mentioned the addition of a third EMS unit. That was a city council budget priority. The council is also concerned about fire services and wanted to get ahead of the growth that's out there, particularly east of here. So we have budgeted some money next year to go ahead and acquire some land for a new fire station out east, out towards 290 East. And then another priority is keeping up with our infrastructure. We've done a lot with water and sewer over the last 5 to 6 years, but we want to continue to do that. We've got about $12.6 million budgeted for major water and sewer improvements. We also, as I mentioned, we have the federal government has come forward and allocated us $2.8 million. And so the council has discussed that over the last couple of months. There's several areas that the council's determined are community priorities that they want to try to fund. And there is still some leftover money that I think they'll be looking at over the next several months and allocating. But so far, they're looking at some broadband improvements to expand our broadband capabilities so our citizens have access to internet and good cell phone service, particularly on the weekends when it's very poor. We're also budgeting money to add generators. We found out we need a lot more generators to provide backup at our water facilities. So these are 2 specific uses of the ARPA funding. And a third use that the council talked about at their last meeting is during COVID, our municipal court system had a backlog of cases because they couldn't have court sessions. So the ARPA allows you to allocate some funds to hire people to catch up on your backlog of court cases. So those are the 3 uses that are in the budget for the ARPA funds at this point in time. And again, this is all subject to change. And also we have about $700,000 left over from the $2.8 million. Another council priority this year was major park improvements. When we got into COVID, one of the first areas we cut was parks. We cut restrooms. These were some things that we felt like we could cut to get through the last year. The council said we want to bring those projects back. We need another restroom at Lady Bird Johnson Park. We need to start working on some of the capital improvements that we postponed over the last couple of years. So that was a priority that the council indicated that we funded. And then every year we try to purchase new vehicles, and this year in the budget we have a new fire truck included, a new ambulance, and we have 7 police patrol vehicles. That's Gary, that's just the vehicles. We're not adding the actual officers. We're just adding the evidence technician and the school resource officer. So those are just replacement of current police vehicles. Okay, next slide. I think this may be the last one. Yep. So where we go from here, again, what we want to do this evening is hear from the citizens that are here. This is a public hearing required by state law to get your input on what you like and don't like about the budget. We're here to take notes and note your comments, and then it will be up to the council whether or not they want to make some changes at the next council meeting. They won't actually make any changes tonight, but they'll take your comments and consider those and decide where they want to make some changes. And then later on this evening, the council is required to take their what's called a record vote on the proposed property tax rate. This is the highest level of taxes that they can allocate this year, and they could, over the next 30 days, they could come down on that rate, but this will establish the ceiling for the property tax rate for this year that can be adopted. If the tax rate is, the proposed tax rate on the record vote is more than the no new revenue tax rate, then they will have to, by state law, have a second public hearing, and that's scheduled on September 8th at 6 o'clock at the fire training room. So, again, you'll have to wait for the vote on that to see if that next public hearing will be necessary. And then, as I mentioned, the council can make additional changes up to the September 20th meeting. They have two more meetings. They have a meeting on September 7th and a meeting on September 20th. And then following the discussion on September 20th, then they will adopt a final budget and they will adopt the final tax rate. So Mayor, Council, and citizens, that's kind of a very broad overview of the budget and kind of where we are at this point in time. So Mayor, unless there's any questions, I would recommend we open this up for a public hearing.
Mayor, I move that we go out of regular session into public hearing.
Okay, a motion by Tom, do I hear a second vote? Second by Jerry, all those in favor?
Aye.
Let the record note that Councilman Bobby Watson is not here this evening. Okay, those who would now like to speak, and I'm gonna, Mo, if it's okay, I'll pick on you since I know you had, were wanting more time for sure. And then after Mo, if y'all will take your turns coming up. Mo, are you on number 2 now?
Well, no, I just, really, the bottom line to emphasize the very first page is that, again, honestly, you have heard from a lot of people here, to go anything above the no new revenue rate, you really need to have a sound justification to convince people that that's the case. When your data shows you leave about 67 on a positive margin, you have 1.3 million in cash reserve, not to mention the fact that your projected sales were based upon 4%, and we heard from Mr. Lindbergh that that is a very conservative number, and he expects that to be even higher. So all of that, with the new constructions and all of that, will really add to your revenue. So your risk is very low, in my judgment, in that regard. So to talk about on the following page, in the back of the sheet, now let me say, what I'm telling you is not to take any iota from the good work that all of you guys are doing and the city staff is doing and all of that. This is only in the interest of discussions and the citizens' input that I'm providing to you. And when I look at some of these things, and Mr. Meyer covered it, I look at the stuff that is, perhaps another look is warranted to look at these things and say, why do I have to lump all of these things in 1 year and burden the taxpayers all at once? Why can I not phase it out over a couple of years to soften the field, if you will? For example, $1.5 million boot ranch lift station, including $347 for the boot ranch storage tank. Of course, boot ranch is my favorite topic because they don't pay taxes with multi-million homes that they have. So it is kind of serious for me. $950,000 in contract studies, and you can see it broken down anywhere from 280 to 260 on the studies, plus 50 here, 60 there, 40 there. I added them all up from your report. $850,000 on the Oak Crest affluent irrigation, and I believe this is for soccer agreement that we're going to have, but soccer agreement, as far as I know, hasn't come forward yet. So $350 land purchase, $300 for RV park restroom, 250 for the COLA salary, 150 for Ranger Fort Management. I don't understand what that is, but it is there. And of course, Christmas lights, 120,000, 12 new staff, equivalent of EPs, 12 new staff, and it's broken down as Mr. Meyer mentioned, 6 EMS plus half the people here and there. It really adds up to about 12 staffs and 11 new vehicles, and of course, not to mention the 25K for housing coordinator and all of that. So all of these things, it seems to me you have leeways perhaps that if you really need to look at some of these things and get yourself within the budget that you want to be and not raise the taxes for what people are already paying exorbitantly high. The other things that, I leave it, and I don't want to debate these things, I leave it for Laura and others to look at it. When I spend quite a lot of hours on these things, believe me, trust me, and I don't need to. But when I look at these things, I came across some inconsistencies. Now, it may be my lack of understanding of how the data is provided. Granted, I'll take that. I'm not a tax expert, and nor am I an attorney in this area at all. But when I look at it, your 811, for example, showed a death rate of 0.0277, 823 showed 0.02834, and then I look at the appraisal worksheet calculation, that's based upon 0.03393. So why am I saying this? Because that is directly affecting your voter approved rate calculations. So if your rates are lower, then your voter approval rates should be lower than what the appraisal calculation has done. Give it for what it is, and the same thing for M&O rates. The maintenance and operations no new revenue rates are much higher, well, not much higher, slightly higher with the city than it is with the appraisal. I found inconsistencies between the page 18 of the report with the project budgets that shows all the breakdowns, and this could be just an honest mistake because you're showing 3 months reserve of $76 million and under 147 million. So I know for a fact that's an error. So that needs to be corrected. Some of us read these things, by the way. And then you also show a debt service that has almost 100K of positive margin. And the question in my mind is, don't we know what is our debt rate? I mean, every one of us has mortgages and loans and all of that, and we know how much I have to pay. So why is it fluctuating back and forth? There may be a good reason for it. And also, I found some disconsistencies between the summary report up front and what is in there. So I leave that for you guys to take a look at it for whatever it's worth. But honestly, I would say, based upon everything that I have looked in there, and I have had the same discussions with the school and the county, and they have gone down much lower. And I think it's time for you all to take the leadership. And based upon the property appraisal values that has been going up, so, and you can't really go, I mean, you could, but honestly, you cannot, in good faith, go anything above no new revenue with the data that is presented. Otherwise, you'd really lose the credibility with the people. And I thank you, and I appreciate it, and I thank all the work that has gone into it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bo. Okay. Yeah, come on up. This is your opportunity again. For anyone else who has not had an opportunity to speak on the budget. If you reintroduce yourself.
I will. Eric Emerson, City of Fredericksburg. Kent, just a question. I don't recall, I went to the excellent presentation that was given out at the golf course by the fire chief about the number of calls that we have to answer all over the county. So the question is, for these 6 new EMS, the new fire truck, and the new ambulance, how much is the county paying? Are they paying half?
Yes, sir, they pay, it's a shared service, 50/50.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Good question. Thank you. Anyone else? Mo? Oh, they're not Mo. I apologize, Mo.
You saw the glare off the head.
I'm sorry, George.
Same glare.
Yeah, introduce yourself again,
City of
please.
Fredericksburg. I'm going to say it again. in my world that I come from since I was 17, when we have an accident, we do a postmortem, we do an after-action assessment. And
Can we keep this, I'm sorry, well, can we just keep this towards the budget, George?
this is
Is this
exactly
something to
it.
do with the
Yep.
budget? Okay,
I'm on
thanks.
this, the direction, back what I was saying before, first figure out what you need to do, and then go budget for it. And what I've said for several months now is you need to do an after-action report on response to COVID and seriously look as if it were a train wreck or an accident. I mean, you declared it a disaster, and there is no comprehensive, publicly reviewed after-action report that says the outcome of that is, we should have done this, we did this right, we should have done that, we should have put these facilities in place or this help available, and that is still waiting to be seen. And it should be, given even your own words, we don't know what's going to happen with the next thing, but we certainly should have the after-action recommendations from last year's disaster. And that's not included in the budget because it hadn't been done.
Okay.
All right, the other one is, we had our February event, the big one. And I did read that report, and I did tell you about that. I don't think it's adequately reviewed or quantified. You had people who went to the elementary school and immediately needed medical care. Next thing I hear is going on that we're asking the church to open the gym and provide some immediate response facility, and there's not going to be any medical help there. You need something over by the hospital or somewhere where they can get medical help right away if another condition like that happens. I mean, it might come just from a windstorm or some other disaster. I don't know. But I don't think that the facilities to enable, with maybe more help at home or, what we learned from that February event that we should do differently, and why is it more of it in the budget? It's not just about generators, okay? Okay, and the last thing is, from that storm, is also part of that is everywhere I looked before the event, the trees and the wires and the drainage and all that is way behind. I mean, the guys came by our alley, thankfully, and did the trees by our thing, but there was only, a couple of guys in a truck, and that's all the city has. And, so if we have another event like we do next February, do you have it in the budget here to be prepared before that ice storm hits? And, I haven't seen it other than just talk about the generator. Lastly, we've talked a lot about residences, increasing residences and young families. And, we have really poor access to the available parks and places that we do have, like Cross Mountain near where we live. You can't get to it without being on the dangerous Milam, section of Milam. And there's no plan to fix that. But we have people in town that wouldn't mind riding their bike out there, but it's way low on the priority. What is the plan to take what I saw in some, there's a future plan for bike paths and stuff like that, make it something that where people would, even though they can't make any more money or, live here like they could in Kerrville, at least they would come here because their kids could ride to the park or, ride to the facility. We just have bad access and poor motivation for young people and residences to stay here. You heard about the daycare crisis last time. It's getting worse. So has the city got any hope of helping families out like that? I know, she was appealing to Bobby, but I mean, what do young families do? They don't have daycare. So I don't know if that's anything you can do in your budget, but it certainly ought to be looked at along with all the other residents. We want to keep this a place where there still are residences, even though we got a ton of as to yours.
Thanks,
it's
George.
content is what I'm after. I'm saying, look at your content, make sure it's all there.
Thanks, George. Appreciate it. Please come up. Any of you will introduce yourself, please. Any of you are city resident or not? I hate to be always having to say that, but
That's okay. I'm very proud to be a resident of Fredericksburg. My name is Carol Hammerson, and I do live here, and the love of my life for 46 years is right back there. We are so thrilled to be back in a town where we can come and actively participate in government. We might not always agree, but we are always thrilled to be here, and thank you for that opportunity and the chance to speak tonight. Very briefly, two things. When these documents are presented at whatever level of city government, it's always been the practice when I've worked for the federal government that when you use an acronym, the first time in a document it is spelled out. That isn't always the case in these, and while many people have been actively participating for a very long time, there are those of us who are new that it would be helpful, or a term of list at the back, sort of a little reference list would be very helpful. And I think people would say, do I care about this or not? The other thing is, someone mentioned the number of people who are leaving. And I don't think I know anybody who says, I can't wait to get out of Fredericksburg. I don't want to live there, man. You know, I think people want to come and live here. But again, the issue of affordable housing is, I would think, the number one reason we lose good public servants and businessmen and young families to other communities who offer them perhaps not the charm and just the pleasure of living in Fredericksburg, but they have to follow the economy. So that's another reason I think we really need to push hard for affordable housing. And thank you very much.
thank you. Anyone else want to speak to budget?
Yeah.
Go ahead, young lady. Oop, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Tracy Knudsen. I live here in Fredericksburg, and I love living here in Fredericksburg. I would like to continue to be able to live here in Fredericksburg. A lot of people are having a hard time right now recovering from last year. A lot of people out of work. The majority, moms and dads, both have to work and unfortunately can't stay at home with their kiddos. I was fortunate that my mom was able to stay home and raise us. And times are hard right now. People going to the gas pump, it really takes a hit to them. And y'all have an opportunity to help our neighbors here in Fredericksburg, and I would ask that you lower it. I would actually ask that you lower it 5% and help people. People really need help right now. People are scared. The future is very uncertain. We hear that gas prices are going to continue to go up. Grocery prices are going to continue to go up. I don't know if y'all have heard, like I've heard, that truckers are going on strike. Times are scary right now, and y'all could be heroes and help everybody in really bad times right now when they need hope. So I just asked if you would just please consider, look at all these beautiful faces out here. Everybody has a story, and it's not easy for everybody. Money's not easy for everybody. People are really struggling. So thank y'all for your service, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tracy. Come on up. Thank you for raising your hand, but you're welcome to stand up when the speaker's ready to. Well, that's fine. I appreciate that.
We'll sing a song.
Name it, and if you're a resident.
Yeah, Derek Spence. I live in the county, but I have a business in town. Just an observation I've made. I do a lot of traveling to different tourist towns all over the country, and I've mentioned this to Jerry before, but every one I've gone to, and y'all don't boo me. You can boo me after I'm through. So what I'm about to say does not apply to Gillespie County residents, okay? So everywhere I go, every city that is a tourist town has parking meters. And I'm not talking about the little, put your quarter in. It's on the corner. It's a big square machine. You put your credit card in it, and $1.50 to $2 an hour to park. I just, going up Main Street between Washington and Crockett, you got roughly, 400 parking places, somewhere in that vicinity. I'm just doing the math on a 10-hour day at $2 an hour, that's $20 for one parking place times 400. So that's $8,000 if I'm doing the math right per day on a Saturday, So parking meters Friday to Saturday, Friday through Sunday. Gillespie County residents, if you're a resident of Fredericksburg, you don't have to pay it. So that keeps everybody's, well, I won't say it. It keeps everybody happy. But if you're a tourist, you're going to come in, you're going to park. And I don't, I've heard arguments say, well, they're not going to pay to park. Well, yeah, they're paying $300 a night to stay at an average hotel. I don't think $2 an hour is going to be, run anybody off from parking on Main Street. Every single tourist town I've been to in these various cities all over the country have parking meters, and it's just a source of revenue that I think the city could utilize. I'm not saying you have to, but it definitely, if you do the math on it, I think it would work out to a decent sum of money. You would have to hire a code enforcement officer, a parking meter officer, or whatever. But I understand that the city had those 30 years ago or whatever, and they got rid of them to, quote, promote tourism, which doesn't seem to be a problem anymore. So, and also it on the affordable housing thing, I don't know if anyone's ever looked at the city of Aspen, Colorado. Maybe you have, but they have, and I couldn't tell you the specifics of it, but I do know they have some sort of program. They've been where we are at, 25 years ago as far as affordable housing goes. They were there in the 90s, where we are now. So it's this problem here with housing is only going to get worse. I was in Truckee, California just a couple weeks ago. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in Truckee, California is going to be $1 million. And so they have no workers. The restaurants are closed. Not anybody working at Burger King because they can't afford to live there. They're renting beds, 8 to a room for $500 a month in the town of Truckee, California, which is comparable in size to Fredericksburg, but their problem's gotten a lot worse than ours. So that's all I have to say. Look at the city of Aspen, study it. It may not be, if somebody can, it may not be a plan that works for us, but it's worth looking at.
Thank you, Jared.
Thanks.
What did I tell you about the parking meters?
Okay, now, those are all good points, but, the budget would be in more input. I appreciate the revenue source. We've discussed that before. It's not a new issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, council again. So I was looking at those slides and noticed the American Rescue Plan money was included. And this is a proposal budget, so yeah, I don't know if this is all set in stone, so this is what I noticed. I wanted to stress a few things. Firstly, if it were up to me, I'd take that $2.8 million from the American Rescue Plan Act and send every dollar right back to Joe Biden's socialist desk. I just skimmed through the budget's projected 2021 expenses related to COVID, and it looks like it'll just cost us a couple $100,000 total. Again, I skimmed through, that's just an estimate I made up quickly. I could be off a little bit. There's no way our city will spend all that money on COVID-related expenses, nor should we try to find places to spend it. That's called wasting our tax dollars on unnecessary stuff that we have no say in, whether or not we want it spent like you're proposing. Secondly, if you go ahead and spend the ARP money, let's not allocate it to new expenditures that will require additional funding after the ARP money runs out. Please don't start some huge projects that will cost us more in a few years from now once it runs out, and you need more money from us to finish the projects. Please don't increase your TRMS retirement benefits, another 1%, just because you have extra money, like Jerry Lukenbach suggested for last year's budget back when we got CARES Act funding. He said we had extra money, so it'll cover it. What he didn't talk about, though, was that 1% increase stretched out for the next 20 years, costing much more than what CARES gave us. That's how it looked to me in my investigations. Overall, I request you plan carefully with the future in mind regarding this ARP money and big projects. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, you were Heath, right? Okay, thank you.
I'm Jeff. That was Jeff.
Oh, that was Jeff. Well, you both look the same to me from here. Thank you, I appreciate that. Anyone else?
Mayor, I move we go out of public hearing back into regular session.
Have a motion by Tom and a second by Kathy to go from public to regular session. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Okay, announce the date, time, and location of the FY 2022 city budget. Kent, you want to do that?
Okay, Mayor and Council, we're required at this meeting to announce that the actual budget will be considered for adoption on September 20th at 6 o'clock. That'll be back in this room here. So again, those of you that are interested, you can come out. That's 4 weeks from today, I guess. And September 20th at 6 o'clock right here. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to section 4, 2021 tax rate. I, review and discuss proposed 2021 tax rate. Double I, approve the proposed 2021 tax rate. Roll call vote. I4, announce date and time and location of the adoption of the 2021 tax rate Monday, September 20th, 2021 at 6 p.m. at the Law Enforcement Building at 1601 East Main Street, Fredericksburg, Texas. Kent?
Yeah, I think Laura's put together this information she can present.
You're not on.
Good evening. The taxing unit's governing body must follow legislative guidelines for proposing and adopting a tax rate. If the tax rate...
Laura, could you get a little closer to your mic, please?
Yes. If the tax rate proposed is by the governing body exceeds the no new revenue or voter approval rate, whichever is lower, they must publish a hearing notice, post a website notice, and hold one public hearing. Scott Fair with the Appraisal District calculates the no new revenue and voter approval rates. The no new revenue rate is defined as the rate that imposes the same total property taxes as last year on properties taxed in both years. The voter approval rate is the highest tax rate that could be adopted before taxpayers can start rollback procedures. The 2021 voter approval rate is .232379 per $100 evaluation. The no new revenue rate for 2021 is .195823 per $100 valuation, down from last year's actual rate of .220775. The no new revenue rate is significant in that any proposed tax rate above that number requires one additional public hearing on the proposed rate prior to the adoption of the tax rate. The council needs to establish a proposed tax rate by taking a record vote at tonight's meeting. It's important to note that after voting on the tax rate, council can adopt the proposed tax rate or a lower rate, but cannot adopt a tax rate higher than the proposed rate. The adoption or the motion to approve the proposed tax rate would need to state the amount of the tax rate and that the rate is a certain percentage above the no new tax rate of .195823. If the tax rate proposed exceeds, then we'll publish the public hearing and we'll schedule that public hearing for Wednesday, September the 8th at 6 o'clock in the fire department training room.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'd also like to call your attention to a handout that Laura distributed right before the meeting that has this one right here. Everybody pull this out. This is, I think, a very important information. It's a tax rate comparison on the various different rates and how that would affect a certain value of property owner. And I think the one in blue that's highlighted, that is the average property value. Is that what that is, 366, Laura?
Yes, that's the average home value this year.
So you can see if you take an average home value of $366,192, how much property tax they would pay based upon a no new revenue tax rate, and then all the way across the board on voter approval rate and so forth. So this will show you again the direct impact to property owners. So I think it's good information that Laura has put together.
Council, questions, observations?
I would just observe that based upon that average home, the amount you would pay above the no new rate if we adopted last year's rate would be $91 for the whole year. Additional to what you paid last year.
That's correct.
Ken, could you talk to me about surplus again, our fund balance? You know, with this, if we would go to this rate, what would be our total fund balance? Would you be able to tell us the fund balance at this rate and at the no revenue rate?
So if you'll turn to the fund balance report in your packet, which is page 18.
You're not on.
Okay. Thank you. So this, again, shows the general fund balance, and the numbers that you have here are based upon the current tax rate. So you can see, based upon our projections for next year, at the end of next year, the revenues and expenses are in the budget, what they will generate, and what we're anticipating will be available in fund balance, basically $6.7 million in fund balance at the end of next year, which is about $1.3 million over our fund balance policy. So again, this is based upon the current tax rate, which was the last rate the council discussed. So if you lower the current tax rate, then of course it would lower the fund balance. So is there a certain tax rate that you're asking about, Mayor, that you want?
Yeah, I would like the, what I used to call the effective tax rate, the no new revenue. What would be our fund balance at that point?
So you have to go back to the...
Now, this would be including everything we've talked about in the budget.
That's right.
Okay, and at this time, do you feel there might be some unknowns coming in yet?
The only unknown I surfaced today is our revenue projections for the TABC revenues may decrease over what we had projected, about $120,000 less. So that's the only new item that is, I think, Laura, do you know of anything else that has surfaced since the last council discussion?
No, I'm not aware of anything else.
Okay. So what would be our fund balance if we stayed with the?
So if you go back to page 53, Mayor, in the budget. Sorry. If you go back to page 53 in the budget, you'll see how much additional taxes are generated based upon the different tax rate scenarios. So you can see in that no new revenue tax rate will generate about $68,000 additional revenue. That's basically off of new growth annexations. And then each incremental increase would be about $105,000 for each step. So you look at adding that far right column up, and you're looking at about $526,000 less. So basically, your fund balance would be about $526,000 less than what we have stated on page 18.
So Ken, you're on agenda packet, page 61.
Oh, let's see.
53.
61?
Oh, yeah, well, 61.
Okay, it's 53, that's the...
Yeah, 61, yes, sir.
Okay.
So again, you see on the far right column of page 61 how the revenue would increase based upon different tax rate scenarios. So if you skip down to the, again, we've got it plugged in at the current rate, which would generate about $526,000 more than the no new revenue tax rate.
So if you took roughly 500,000 off that, we would have a fund balance of roughly around 700,000.
That's correct. Well, no, the fund balance is 6.7.
Over and above what's required on our 3 months.
Oh, yeah, yes, sir.
Okay.
So we'll still be above our financial management policy, around $800,000 above.
Ken, could you address Gary Nephendorf's comment about the American Rescue Plan funds being included in the general fund budget.
I think what he's suggesting is that we shouldn't use that to figure up our fund balance, what our fund balance policy is. Is that kind of what you took from that comment? Or we should eliminate that and figure out our fund balance?
Yes, that's what I understood, that we should remove the revenues and expenses from doing that.
Since it's a one-time revenue and expense, that we shouldn't use that in our calculation of fund balance is what he said. I don't disagree with that.
So for our next meeting, can we have a summary that takes that out?
Sure.
Thank you.
Jerry, White, any comments?
Oh, I don't know. I guess, some of my concerns here is, that I was talking with Charles Offer, and he said that according to some predictions, they're kind of predicting a winter like we had this last year. And I guess if we have a winter like that, that really put a big hurt on the city. If you go down on the taxes, the legislators put a cap on the cities as far as how much they can raise their taxes, their tax rate. So that's kind of a concern of mine. Everybody keeps saying, that we need to go down, we need to go down. Well, I don't know. I think there was 1 year, and this will be my 14th year that I have served on the city council. And I can only remember one time where the city raised their taxes. The city was always at the head of the ball game, lowering their taxes. When the evaluations went up, we always lowered our taxes. I can't remember any time that we didn't do that. This thing here with COVID, we got more of these cases coming up. You're seeing with the Delta virus, you've got more children than that are being affected by this. They had a real good thing on 60 Minutes the other night on the COVID. If you haven't seen it, it sure be something to look at because it's very eye-opening. Mo brought up the thing with kids' activities and tree clearing and electrical lines, and these things were brought up, and the housing, the mayor made a comment here a couple of years ago when I was on council, and he said, yeah, we can keep cutting, but what do you want to cut out? Do you want to cut out your tree trimming? Do you want to cut out, what do you want to cut out? Limb pickup, leaf pickup? We can cut out stuff. What do you want to cut out? If you want to keep us doing what we're doing, we need to have the money to do it. And employees make a big. You don't have the employees, then what do you got? Then where you at? The TMRS, the reason that we did that is because we were trying to keep up with the other cities in order to keep our employees and allow some of the employees that are at retirement age to be able to retire. So, when you get them to retire, then you get younger employees in that. I know at my, at 69, I can't do what I used to do at 30 and 40. So, it's, you get a younger employee in, you have them more productive, they come in at a lower salary. This is what the TMRS was all about. It was to help our employees be able to retire earlier. Yeah, I know times are hard. Dad was the only one working too. We had a lot of deer meat, we all had hard times, and I know it's hard now, and we just need to see how we're going to work this out. This housing coordinator is going to help us try and figure out some way of getting more affordable housing here. We got to do something. Everybody knows we got to do something, so let's go ahead and work on that. We'll look at these tax rates, that's all I can say, and see what we can come up and see which is the best option for the city of Fredericksburg. I live in Fredericksburg, I pay taxes too. I think that's about all.
Thank you. Well, it appears we have a healthy fund balance, and we will have, with the proposed or what we've been talking about, a pretty good healthy, over that 3-month requirement. But we're not, whatever we say tonight, it can always be lower. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
You're setting the cap, you're setting the ceiling.
Okay. With that being said, any further discussion on it? Thomas?
Mayor, I move that we approve a proposed property tax rate of 0.225823, a rate that is 15.3% above the no new revenue tax rate of 0.195823.
Okay, we have a motion by Tom. Do I hear a second?
0.225823.
And we can always lower it. We can't go up, you can always lower it. I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Tom, second by Jerry. Now, this is a roll call vote. I'll start with my left with the lady. Your vote, yea or nay? You're in favor? All those in favor?
This second.
Okay.
And wait, it's time for discussion.
Oh, time, further discussion. Thank you, Tom.
I know that I wasn't on the council last year, but I know that, I believe that council cut certain things from the budget because it was a pandemic year, and there was uncertainty about how it was going to affect businesses and homeowners, so forth, and their economic situation. So we were about $500,000 below what we might otherwise have put in the budget. Was that right, Kent?
I can't recall exactly.
Yeah, but it wasn't a small amount. It was fairly substantial, and so we set a at that point, fairly low tax rate of 0.220775. I think that rate gives us pretty good income. However, again, we don't know with the rate of infections going up, and with in case we're in a climate crisis again next winter, what those costs will be. So while I'm a little bit reluctant to agree with Tom, I will vote to raise it to 0.225823, which we can always lower after we consider other factors. So, aye.
Let's go for anybody else, Jerry?
No, we can always lower it. It's not putting gold right now. I'll vote aye.
Yeah, just a second. I want to get 2 cents into it.
Okay,
Thank you,
go ahead.
cents. You know, I'm hearing what you folks are saying, and I am in complete agreement. That's why I was asking, what our over fund balance would be at those 2 different rates. I'm going to vote nay when I get to this, because I think we should show good faith in lowering our maximum tax rate. And again, I think it's important that we have the fund balance necessary to cover unexpected expenses. And I think we have a healthy fund balance to do that. So with that being said, that's where I'm at on that. All right, Shelley, do you want to do a roll call vote?
Mayor, can I make
Sure.
a comment on, I guess, your comment? We're not voting on a tax rate. What we're voting on is the maximum that we could go, and I don't think anybody up here is thinking of going at the voter approval or even at below it, directly below it. So I think the idea that what we have to keep in mind is we've instructed city staff, they are still working on the budget, and we will set a tax rate at our next meeting, but I'm concerned that we need to give ourselves some leeway at the top of the tax rate to be able to handle any contingencies. that might come up. We might come up with a lower, in fact, I'm sure we will come up with a lower tax rate than the 0.225823. But I think tonight it would be good if we gave the city the leeway to come down off of that number and not have an artificially lower number that we have to work with. We don't have to.
Well, unless I misunderstood Mr. Myers, I don't think we saw any unpleasant surprises except in one area.
That's the only one we're aware of. That's the only one we're aware of right now, Mayor.
Which was $100 and something thousand decrease. Okay. Are we ready? Okay.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
All right.
So Mayor, with that vote, there will be a public hearing on the tax rate on September 8th at 6 o'clock. That meeting will be at the fire training room because this room is already booked for that meeting. So the public hearing on the tax rate is required on September 8th at 6 o'clock.
Okay. With that being said, that should be the last of our agenda items, is that correct? Except,
We need to announce that the final tax rate will be considered for approval on Monday, September 20th at 6 o'clock at the Law Enforcement Center here. And that's the last item on the agenda, Mayor.
with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Have a motion by Tom.
Second.
Second by Jerry. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.